We are on a joint military operation with the Malaysian Army and police to aid the recovery of the remains of the personnel who were buried at this site in the 1950s. We are also here over Remembrance, and we will be paying our respects as well.
The Dakota KN630 of 52 Squadron based at Changi took off on that day in 1950 on a target marking mission for 7 Lincoln bombers to come along and attempt to bomb some of these communist camps. These camps were located in probably the most inaccessible part of the high jungle in peninsular Malaysia. As we understand it from the records, the aircraft lost power on one engine and failed to climb out of a steep valley. We then know that it crashed at that site.
As you know, your Chief of Army made a report to our Chief of Army to say that this Dakota, which had crashed in 1950, had been discovered. Thank you. Thank you for giving all your effort, all your resources, and joining here this morning to enable us to go and do this honourable mission.
Well, the Dakota crash site is located in the high jungle of Kelantan in peninsular Malaysia, which is very difficult to access. Particularly more difficult during the onset of the rainy season, the monsoon. These communist camps were located in probably the most inaccessible part of the high jungle. The brother of the navigator of the aircraft contacted the Malaysian High Commission and asked if the issue of finding the Dakota and recovering the bodies could be revisited. As far as we're aware from the RAF records at the time and the War Ministry records, the Dakota took off on that day in 1950 and it flew to Kota Baru. It picked up passengers, we believe, for the purpose of spotting local knowledge, because it was on a target marking mission for 7 Lincoln bombers to come along and attempt to bomb some of these communist camps. The aircraft lost power on one engine and failed to climb out of a steep valley. We then know that it crashed at that site. A patrol was sent. It took them about 8 or 9 days to actually get there to locate the aircraft. The patrol found that all on board were killed, and they then buried their bodies in wet ground on the other side of the river to the crash site. the final section from the final base camp up over to the deep ravine which contained the Dakota, I would probably describe as rather bloody. And that involves a number of slopes, but most challenging of all was the final part, which was an 800-metre climb through the jungle, through mud and clay, quite often using vines to try to get ourselves up there, that we had accessed what is regarded as pretty inaccessible terrain. And we did it on the edge of the rainy season. As in fact, one of the forensic scientists said that it was certainly the most challenging conditions that they had ever been in Malaysia. We were all elated because after a very hard slog, we had actually found the aircraft. And in finding the aircraft, of course, we had a very, very good chance, we felt, of bringing out 12 bodies. And that was good news to us, and we were very, very up for it. As far as we're aware from the records, the patrol found that all on board were killed, and they then buried their bodies in wet ground on the other side of the river to the crash site, and that those bodies were wrapped in blankets and buried 4 feet down. And that really was the information that we needed in order to focus and dig for those individuals, in order to bring out these people finally and properly honour them. We had a small section of Malaysian Army engineers, and they were the primary diggers. And we had agreed, because the reports that we received indicate they'd been buried down at 4 feet, that the engineers would dig to 3 feet. And then the archaeology team, headed up by a doctor of archaeology, would then take it from there, very slowly, sifting, and of course we had 2 doctors of forensic science as well. So that was how we planned it. We focused initially on a mound. There was a small mound, and that could have been the location. So we focused on that, started from there, and dug down as far as we could. That was the site. They had the measurement, but I would think it was something like 15 feet by about 20 feet in length. Digging down, we were able to find rock on the one side, and on the other side it started to flood. In other words, being so close to the river was starting to come up through it. However, on the one side, we dig down to about 5 feet, and the archaeological team were then able to take accurate soil samples. They were able to peg out how long, roughly, that soil had been there, whether it had been washed away and replaced. And all the time, this was giving us good information. Subsequently, when we found nothing there, we then elected to extend it to one side, what I would probably say is to the north, in order to dig another small pit and check there. And then we started, having hit rock at that location, we then started to extend to the south. And then, to ensure that we had every chance of finding them, we dug trenches in between the two, in fact in between the three, to ensure that we had the best chance of finding anything that was there. We have 12 pieces of what we can now call human bone, which were identified pretty immediately by the forensics people and others in Guruma-Sang. Consequently, there is a lot more work to be done on the forensic and DNA side, and so they've been taken to the University of Science Forensic Department in Kota Bharu, where they will be further examined, and of course we will follow up with our own DNA team from the UK. Well, of course, we were there on Sunday the 9th, which was Remembrance Sunday. And so, with the full agreement of all of the Malaysians on site, most of whom were Muslim, we felt that we should conduct a remembrance service, and they had no objections to us doing that in the traditional British way. And therefore, after an introduction and a description of how we were to do it, and the events that took place, how the crash happened, we were able to hold a remembrance service, which consisted of saying the Lord's Prayer, also having a 1-minute silence, and declaring the ode, which is normally said on Remembrance Sunday: "They shall grow not old, as we who are left grow old.
Age shall not weary them,
nor the
years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them." Edward Robert Talbot, RAF, Flight Lieutenant. Flight Lieutenant Geoffrey Clarence Carpenter, Royal Air Force. Sergeant Thomas O'Toole, Royal Air Force. Corporal F. Bryant, Royal Army Service Corps. Driver P. Taylor, Royal Army Service Corps. For A. Wilson, Royal Army Service Corps. Driver M. Goldsmith, Royal Army Service Corps. Major J. H. Proctor, the Loyal Regiment. Mr. A. Rentz of the Lands Department. Police Constable Mohammed bin Abdul Lalil. Enchik Yai Yakob. Enchik Atsib Aliyah.
I think on the one side, it's important that we always bring back those who are missing in action. On the other side, I think it's important that we advertise what has happened in the past and remind people of what has happened in the past in terms of conflict, because that is a learning process, and by or through a learning process, we can then ensure that such things don't happen again. Well, I think I would take away a sense of satisfaction that after all of these years we had actually got there, and that we had actually done something to A, bring out these people, and B, to honour them in a way that they needed to be honoured after 58 years.
Mm-hmm.